In a quiet village among the rolling hills of Tuscany, a lonely woodcarver named Geppetto spent his weary days crafting a marvelous puppet from a mysterious piece of pine that seemed to hum with a life of its own. He carved every feature with trembling hands, giving the puppet a mischievous expression and naming him Pinocchio, treating the wooden object with the same tender devotion as if he were a real son born of his own flesh. As the silver moon cast shimmering shadows, the benevolent blue fairy descended in a radiant glow of starlight to grant Geppetto's deepest wish by breathing the spark of consciousness into the cold, wooden limbs of the puppet. With a firm voice, the fairy warned Pinocchio that while he could move and speak, becoming a real human boy required him to prove his worth by being brave, perfectly truthful, and entirely unselfish in his actions. When the first golden rays of morning touched the workshop, Geppetto was stunned to find his wooden creation dancing on the workbench, laughing with joy and calling him Papa in a voice like a clear, ringing bell. Despite his poverty, the selfless woodcarver sold his only warm wool coat in the freezing winter to afford a brand new spelling book for Pinocchio, wanting more than anything for his wooden son to have a bright future. However, on his first journey to school, Pinocchio's fickle heart was lured away by the thumping drums and vibrant banners of Stromboli's puppet theater, which promised a world of excitement far beyond the dull walls of a classroom. Entranced by the dazzling lights, he foolishly sold his precious book for a ticket and leaped onto the stage, dancing with mechanical marionettes. Unaware that his disobedience was the start of a dangerous and dark adventure, the greedy puppet master Stromboli, realizing a puppet without strings was worth a mountain of gold, cruelly snatched Pinocchio and locked him in a cold iron cage, intending to exploit him for profit for the rest of his life. In the damp darkness, the blue fairy appeared, her light illuminating his tears, and asked why he had not attended school, but the terrified and ashamed boy began to weave a complex web of desperate, imaginative lies. With every dishonest word, Pinocchio's wooden nose began to unnaturally stretch and grow, sprouting green leaves and small twigs at the tip, until it was so incredibly long that he could no longer turn his head within the cage. Seeing his nose, Pinocchio wept bitter tears of genuine regret, realizing his lies were a physical burden that exposed his inner shame, and he begged the fairy for one more chance to prove he could be good. The fairy magically restored his nose and unlocked the cage with a wave of her wand, urging him to run straight home to his father without looking back at the many temptations of the cruel world. But his resolve was weak, and he was soon intercepted by the crafty fox and the bumbling cat, two swindlers who used honeyed words to convince Pinocchio that he could grow wealth overnight without any hard work. They led him to the field of miracles, whispering that if he buried his gold coins and whispered a secret spell, a magnificent tree dripping with gold would sprout from the earth by the time the moon rose. While Pinocchio dreamed of grand gifts for Geppetto, the two villains waited for the silence of night before digging up the coins, laughing at the puppet's naivety as they vanished into the shadows with his money lost and broke. Pinocchio met a group of rowdy boys on a coach who invited him to Pleasure Island, a legendary place where there were no rules, no parents, and absolutely no schoolwork to be done. For many days, Pinocchio indulged in a life of laziness, eating candy and playing games, completely ignoring the mournful braying sounds of donkeys that seemed to echo from the dark, industrial corners of the mysterious island. Suddenly, Pinocchio felt a terrifying itch as long, fuzzy donkey ears sprouted from his head and a coarse tail burst through his pants, a physical manifestation of his descent into animalistic and thoughtless, lazy behavior. Realizing the island's curse turned lazy children into donkeys, Pinocchio gathered his courage and leaped into the churning ocean waves, swimming desperately for his life. Just as his donkey transformation was nearly complete in the water, after hours of battling the tide, a white seagull delivered a heartbreaking message, telling Pinocchio that Geppetto had built a small boat and set sail into the treacherous, stormy ocean to find his lost wooden son. the bird warned that a monstrous whale known as Monstro, the undisputed terror of the deep, had emerged from the abyss and swallowed the old man's boat whole during a violent surge of the midnight waves, without hesitation. The brave wooden boy dove into the dark abyss of the sea, and after a desperate struggle, he was sucked into the gargantuan, rib-lined cavern of the whale's belly through its massive, filter-like teeth. There, in the dim light of a dying candle, he found a frail and heartbroken Geppetto sitting on the deck of his wrecked boat. Looking as though he had given up all hope of ever being saved, their reunion was an explosion of hugs and tears. But Pinocchio quickly realized they had very little time to act before the whale's massive lungs ran out of air or the creature dove back into the depths. "We must make the whale sneeze," Pinocchio shouted, gathering dry wood and old crates from the many shipwrecks to build a massive, smoking bonfire that would irritate the giant, prehistoric beast's sensitive and giant throat. As thick smoke filled the vast chamber, the creature began to shake and groan until it let out a sneeze so titanic that it launched their small, makeshift raft through the air and out into the sea. In the freezing, stormy water, Pinocchio grabbed his father's collar and kicked with every ounce of strength, fighting against the massive waves that threatened to pull the old man down into the dark grave of the ocean. He dragged the unconscious Geppetto onto the dry, golden sand before his own strength finally failed him, and he collapsed in the surf, his wooden body battered and motionless beneath the rising light of the morning sun. The blue fairy appeared one final time, whispering that his ultimate act of bravery and his selfless sacrifice for his father had finally proven that he possessed the noble heart of a true, living human being. A brilliant flash of azure light enveloped the beach, and the hard, painted wood of Pinocchio's body began to soften and change, turning into warm skin while his stiff joints became flexible and his heart beat. Pinocchio gasped for air, his lungs filling with the salty breeze as he realized he was no longer a puppet, but a real boy with the freedom to choose his own path and feel true human emotions. Geppetto woke up on the sand and cried out in utter disbelief and overwhelming joy, embracing his son who was no longer made of pine, but was a real boy. Realizing their long journey was over, the village celebrated their return with music, and Geppetto's workshop was transformed into a home filled with constant laughter. As the old man and his son lived out their days in perfect and happy harmony, Pinocchio became the most diligent student in the province, always carrying a small piece of pine in his pocket to remind him of the heavy weight of the wooden nose he once wore in his selfishness. Jiminy Cricket, his loyal friend and official conscience, remained perched on his shoulder for many years, continuing to whisper wise advice to ensure that the boy never forgot the valuable lessons he had learned through trial. The boy, once carved from a block of wood, grew into a man of extraordinary character, known throughout the country for his unwavering honesty and his boundless kindness toward those who were lost or in need. He took loving care of Geppetto until the very end, returning the same infinite love and patience that the woodcarver had poured into that first piece of wood so many years ago. On that moonlit night, the timeless story of Pinocchio serves as a powerful reminder that we are not defined by our birth, but by the difficult choices we make and the courage we show when facing our own inner demons. The legend of the wooden boy who earned a soul remains a cherished testament to the enduring power of truth, the necessity of courage, and the transformative magic found within the bonds of a loving family.